In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for all the sentient beings. Now we are on the new chapter. My favorite chapter actually. This, I have to say it's my favorite. So one day that I can proudly say it's my, right now I'm practicing on it. So this is the one of the most the practice which I always fail. This is the one. Of course, others too, but this is the like the base which I always have a problem with. Okay, and maybe I have so many also my friends, some mutual friends in here too. Okay, 다 디레도 와 리브 둠버 준주 템바스 다 다 대다를 수비 준주 점 대다를 전로 창주네 루메 요메 신 소놈 준주 메미 중스 the first stanza, please.
Having patience, I should develop enthusiasm, for awakening will dwell only in those who exert themselves. Just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm.
So whether a practitioner or any kind of work that you are doing, without having effort, then you cannot become successful, or you can finish what you have begun. So that's the reason. If you take a kind of a highlight, where Shantideva is talking about the joyous effort or the enthusiasm, where Chandrakirti in his the middle way, where he talked about the joyous effort. So if you can, where you see it's right after the patience. So because once you feel the patience is a really important practice, and then right after that, to continue this practice much more stronger, then joyous effort is always needed. Of course, if the generosity and the ethical conduct, all we need joyous effort. But if you really give a thought, and then why Chandrakirti, Shantideva, and all the great beings spoke this chapter right after the patient, gives us a very, very important message. Oh, now I'm going to speak in Tibetan. 두스리샤다 다단다 직직난 디 셜로바든나 여러분 신치지 대들 수배 준주점 시치 다 대들 수배기다 수배 편 아니 세고마공비 님이 아니 수바 딘추 컨디스 땡고 요면 탑시 창만 랍접을 쉬올라 아니 다 랍자들 가르쳐 보잖아. 또 수바디 초도 교바디 약보지 용야라. 너 준비 좀 쉬어 주시다. 랍자를 또 준비 좀 시제. 다 대들 전로 전주네 시다. 준비 된바이나 가리용 거스나. 아니 전주네 세도 전주비 시도도를 세서 거지. 전주비 자와초도를 세지. 봐. 전주네. 다 원은 내당의 컨디션에 오르 시도점에 아니 배치샤나치 룸미 요매버신 그러와 남규 체메도 표시하베나 롱슈침부터 잡으유나 아니 체메디 도좀 버그레 인시루도와 도좀 버그 시루도와 다디 매버스야라 롱디 매버스고요 롱디 매버스토이나 아니 처음에 봐봐 대소를 열어봐 제상가 롱메 요와 매버신 선남 준주 매민중 스드sambe 공도 시에베 단다 빠지기 전주기 심 공수기 뭐 방전에 전주 심조를 보시 마제반 제주지 깨와 냠바 매바 양세 다 단다 준주디 깨와 냠바 매바 공들어 제상가 강기 전주 심조를 보시 마제 반음 제주지 깨와 냠바 매바양 세디 바로도 다단다 가서래 리우 두 송차로 봐 다단다 듬바들 봐 디조 참제 달 리우 듬바들 라레디여자 소남 대다 탐제 준주디 매바이나 용구말스 매민중 세등 아주 친이 흉나로라야 아니 매민중 세디 인지문지 하고 매민중 매나 민중기 대화 세트리 매민중 세티
그러
어디 지금도 좋다
and so if we start to work our way through this first verse, sort of take a close look at this first verse, then for instance in the first line it says having patience I should develop enthusiasm and so what this refers to is what we'd already contemplated before in terms of the patience of practice of patience, where we talked about the benefits or the advantages of practicing patience, the faults which are associated with not practicing patience, and also the ways in which to engage in the practice of patience, how we rely on how we sort of engage in or rely on the practice of patience. And so this sort of advice, and the next advice that comes out of that, after all that explanation in the 6th chapter, is then how to get the best out of all of that. And then we come to this sort of engaging in, or so starting to engage in or rely on the practice of, I'll call it joyous effort in the translation, but there are many terms in terms of relying on joyous effort, sundru in the Tibetan. And so, and also then it's sort of in the second line, so it's sort of how to sort of start engaging and relying on the practice of joyous effort. In the second line, it says in the text, for the root text, for awakening will for awakening will dwell only in those who exert themselves. So here, of course, what we're talking about is sort of like the roots, or the kind of roots, or the basis of enlightenment, and that's not actually enlightenment itself, but the roots of enlightenment, and abiding in those roots of enlightenment. And how does that occur? So here in the example, in the last two lines of the first verse, it says, just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm. So this gives us this sort of very nice example of how, for instance, if you are making an offering of the offerings of butter lamps, and if there's a very strong sort of breeze or some wind, then the butter lamp will burn brightly for a short time, but then it will go out. And so the only way to stop that occurring is to prevent the wind, to sort of protect from the wind, and therefore the butter lamp can burn brightly. So here what we're talking about is this is the kind of section when we talk about the prayer about bodhicitta, to give the prayer where we talk about the where giving rise to bodhicitta where it has not yet arisen, and where it has risen, it not deteriorating in any way. Now we're kind of in that section where, having given rise to bodhicitta, we then want to prevent it from deteriorating. This is sort of mentioned also further in the 6th chapter as well. And so what it's saying to us is that it also, in the Tibetan, in the last line, which probably doesn't come across very well in the English, it says, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm. And this is specifically relating to that relationship, which I've spoken about several times, of where if the preceding cause is not in place, then the corresponding result of that cause is impossible for it to arise. So it's a kind of, this is mentioned in the debate text lot, in which, and so what happens is that if effort, so here it says that merit will not occur if the corresponding cause of that merit, the practice of a joyous effort, is not there.
Olas. Tatene chesanga dina rol ya tada gesep buchi ge tudin chuji tawbe ge ani kongji de omajube kongde tangashara. Chesanga omajube ge sigde nalore yondemo lu zunju jendo shin sonam lode choni ni ji ju sechi. Adadi indu manzo tat deshe dinyen shu chabat jibor jire ta ganje sonam gu choda yishi gu cho 간지지 임베이나 연된 간지지 임베이나야 아니 준주를 땡고 요르지 준주디 중베이나 아니 정신기 아니 연된 대다 탐지 톱이 용거를 했어야지 어디 디도 다진나로니 개치쇼도 가르스는 담마시 드시 찍도 월로 다디 월시 있어요 다단다 디에 템브르
And so what is in both of the commentaries to this verse, both in Dharma Rinpoche's commentary to the root text and also in Thupten Chökyi Drapa's commentary to the root text, it also kind of refers back to the lines in Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way in the 6th chapter. Oh no, sorry, the fourth chapter of Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way, which is the chapter on joyous effort. And the first two lines of there are two stanzas in that chapter, and the first two lines of the first stanza which read, all higher qualities follow after joyful perseverance. It is the cause of both collections of merit and intelligence. So here what we're referring to is the two collections of merit and of, let's say, wisdom. The collections of merit and wisdom are all completely reliant on joyous effort. And if if joyous effort is not there, these qualities do not arise. And if joyous effort is there, then as well as all the other qualities, not just the collection of merit and wisdom, and all qualities rely on joyous effort. And if joyous effort is there, then these qualities will come out, will stem from that joyous effort. So there's this kind of central place of joyous effort in all of these texts.
So when I was very young, I have one of my favorite comic book, which is the Milarepa's comic book. So on the cover, there is Milarepa meditating. So on the top of his head, there is a butter lamp. So I was always wondering why there's a butter lamp on his head. Maybe it's saying that maybe he can stand still very well. Maybe this is to show off. But now once I see this here, this verse, the first verse of the 7th chapter, so it really proves it's not a specific really butter lamp on his head, but it is symbolized that the master himself has the joyous effort within him, so that whatever harms or other causes will, as a condition, it comes, but he can always meditate very well because he has a joyous effort. So now it connects. Next stanza will bring out what is the joyous effort. Then you have to always remember, whenever I say what if, I always in my talk I bring up this that whatever practice we are doing, if you are enjoying it, that's what I'm always saying, then it is a sign that your practice is going very well. You are not enjoying it and you are doing it, then it is like a punishment. It's a punishment from your guru or your punishment from yourself. So now this the next chapter will support my kind of whatever normally I say. So that means the joy. So in here, translation for the 7th chapter is enthusiasm. So it's more like the joy side, but it does not cover with the kind of effort. So I think the joyous effort has a much more deeper meaning because it has a two-way of thinking, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. So now let's look at the 2nd stanza. Serkong second, please.
What is enthusiasm? It is finding joy in what is wholesome. Its opposing factors are explained as laziness, attraction to what is harmful, and despising oneself out of despondency.
Joy said the 기분 남기 기분 총비 계절 맴체 joy said the 개월 enjoy 체 계절도와 joy said 제장가 아니 effort 되다고 다 유효를 많이도 제장가 디나로라 정강 준주기 오 강인번 미국 개월 민니 오버도 said 다 들은 줄 잡을 된 저와 되도와 다 가르치는 세나다 준비 신이디 가도 있네요. 레로 년보를 더 보고요레스. 상무당당지. 레로 년보를 누구면 도나? 레로 년보를 더 두고면 도나? 아니 준비 처리요 말레스. 상무당당지디 야고도 봐. 이 콩디 가르도스나 아니 도지값소 풍부하게 랍치했어요. 너 디값소 간지도스나 다들 디 투든 추기 잡아도 나도가 뒤에 통화 중에 디 여러분 투든 추기 잡아 디베 쇼장 시비 쪽숨
기마다.
도와 다디네 마트 조지 인진 소로 지니 좀시가 주든 인진 개발레서나 풍부하게 잡지 내장시 도와 순주 강신나 렐레게 년보디 개월로 셈 엄보로 도와고 세트다 제장가 다 디그 삼로 당당의 중배이나 안남샤 준도 알란즈 준주 지기 세야디 아니 우르지 dimje 예 셈디 민게비 초를 만들어버치 인 게베 초라도 샤야디 삼상체는 디 노르도 봐 디점식이 렐로 인연보로 도움도 봐 삼로 디 여가 점식 제장가 네바르도 알란즈 준주 장 세야디 삼로 나로라 렐로 인연보도 좋고고요지 다딜레도 야고요 렐로 인연보로 도난데다 슈를 리그데 제장가 미든초데 뭐야 오마시나 준주 강다 강템베네 준주 티는 티기 미든초데 야고 정어 현재 아니 텔이야 년보도난데 신고레스 아니 데네신에 도와든 것도 봐 대리님은 지리니 준주 제가 되게 민ገብ에 디다 디초래 아니 니 카데 잡이 있어야지 아니 셈나로래야 또 믹스딩 것도 봐 신 또와디 남셔준도 또 패버다 지레다 기부 야고 총트린 개와야고 사요 총 삼지마도 민거 뉴로 줘야지다 민거의 초로마당베기 캡산된 아주 선물도 요마와 디지준
And so first in the first line of the second verse of Shantideva 7th chapter, it says, what is enthusiasm? It is finding joy in what is wholesome. So it gives us the kind of entity or the nature, the actual entity or nature of what joyous effort actually is. And then it sort of, if we sort of follow through the sort of translation of the Tibetan words, then it always has to have this element of taking delight in virtue. So it's not a kind of normal kind of just kind of enjoyment in virtue. It's very specifically enjoyment in virtue, not the just kind of general happiness or joy that we might feel about any kind of thing, but very specifically that delight in virtuous in virtue. So that's what an effort, of course, is there. That sort of perseverance aspect, the effort aspect is there, but it has to have this other side of having delight in virtue. And in Thubten Chögyal Drapa's commentary, there are a couple of places, there are a couple of quotes that Thubten Chögyal Drapa quotes. One is from the section on the 5 aggregates, which says that what if we ask what is joyous effort, it is the antidote to laziness. And sorry, I translated it. It's got the antidote to laziness, and which is the mind's manifest delight in virtue. That's from the what's called a section on the 5 aggregates. And then also from because the sutra so then also so that's important. So this is a very important aspect, that what it says in that section on the 5 aggregates, it states that it is the antidote to laziness. And without having that without having that sort of aspect of being an antidote to laziness, then it wouldn't be a complete form of joyous effort. And so this is a very important thing to think about, is that and so how it's not just this way in which we sort of stop our mind from just going towards the kind of negative and non-virtuous kind of side, but we it's not like we sort of close our eyes, concentrate very hard, try to stop our mind getting distracted away to the kind of negative side, but try to encourage our mind to focus on the sort of virtue and the virtuous side. But that's still not, just like that, it still doesn't become an antidote. So it's important that it becomes an antidote to laziness itself. And so it's also, so what also occurs here is that it's very important to in talking about joyous effort, we immediately have to also identify what is the sort of the opposite kind of unconducive opposite, or the kind of counteract to joyous effort, which is laziness. So you also have that way in which you also have to identify the thing which is the opposite of joyous effort, which is laziness. And so you have to know what is the opposite, and then on the basis of that, then you can know how to so it's this way in which we're it's not just a sort of way of stopping our mind from going to non-virtue and placing it focusing it just on virtue, but it's this way of having a joy in virtue, but also a mind which is able to counteract that negative side, or that opposing side. It has a kind of proactive way of counteracting that negative side, and then that is really what becomes a joyous effort for us.
야부지 중마 중세디 레로 인연보로 야부지 로서나 준주 광도 패로야지 대나신다 지바 수림 쇠바 다가랑 디 당부 솜데 대가랑라야 지바 야고 땅마나세야디 세나기 인연보로 두고도 조금도 그러와 아니 지기 수림 야고 송세야디 레준지 리야 samlo shukchimbu ju yue dine chigi ani ta nyegi chigi mingiwi chor mandro bati ani chigi gewa yabu songtu bati kyabsang tonga tuya ani soba yabu goma gom seya diya ya le junji shisha re le junji shisha we to ani tarin nyegi ani chigi kondo masawa chiji 경을 라비 손으로 지도 중송데 이나야 삼로지 땅베이나 니 달랭은에 라칭지래가 지체셨어.
거기
셔봐.
소파이
되게 셔봐 공부되게 파종원은 내내마 셔되게 아니 거두리야 도지기 커버를 요래데 이나 푸르 삼로 땅운데 년원에 전에 내가 라칭지 지체셨어. 디삼로 투에 디 중나 아니 쇠배기 쇠복 건배기 아니 컨트롤에 타봐 컨트롤이 심어주고 싶어 어디서 먹을 도도 대나신 다단다 준주세디 레로 다디 거두기 준주디 파천으로는 진배기 준주
알아요.
어제 아니 수준기 준주 아니 쇠배기 준주 딱 검단데 당기는 시도 레로 데라 비게 레로 세디 년부디 년부지원에 데라니 카드 잡 다가랑 짐바 레온 짐바디도 아니 짐바 당도 좀 함상 소소 세나 중고데 세나디마 고투도나 남상 짐비기 짐벌리 템비 준주 패종 랍드르베 오든데 삼로 코토비나 아니 단데르 공배도 그래스 시레세티 다단다디 워드를 지리기를 도 첨번이샤 다데도가 두된 추지 처리 도 첨번이샤 레장 묘모남지 다디르샤 디 묘모남지 시직디 가르스나 레로레스 lelo di yona chugun meba yin sidu chugun sidu kompedo do chudi meba charu research ta digi dochola karu kotu resana ani 어디를 가서 그래 dindinan la du sarda lelo jeni chenju ni shin dirim oda digdo kanji nyomo 탐지기 시디 lelo res koto bina yenden 탐지기 시직디 가르에서는 주주스
Yintin tamshi or yintin.
이 koto 봐 노절 디 koto 어디 과단에 가르를 시작하려면 단단히 라본나 신체제 진비 준주면은 진보 공부해주고 말해 수준도 준주되면은 수준 공부해주고 말해 오도스도 랍다rin bir 진소 퍼진 툴이 잘했다 어디 인지미 삼고고 또 삼십지 어디 직도다.
And so what we see with, if we take, in terms of what we've done here is, first of all, sort of talked about joyous effort as directly as an antidote and as an antidote to its, counteract, is sort of counteractive opposite, the laziness, but also, but also what we can do is also talk about this in relation to all of the other perfections. So that's just one example, but also we can talk about all of the other perfections in terms of the particular practice of the perfection, and then the particular the perfection as providing an antidote to the sort of negative kind of opposite of it. So that, for instance, when we talk about generosity, when we talk about the 6 perfections and then the first perfection of generosity, then we the opposite of the generosity will be this sense of miserliness, and therefore the generosity acts as an antidote or counteract to the miserliness. In terms of ethical discipline, then in terms of ethical discipline, then here we're really discussing the sort of the karmic law of cause and effect, and what we do in order to prevent negative actions and non-ethical conduct from arising is to sort of focus on avoiding seeing the advantages of the positive or virtuous actions, and understanding the disadvantages as negative actions, and avoiding them, but all in the context of the karmic law of cause and the law of karmic cause and effect. And also this to some extent takes place in the practice of patience, in terms of its its opposite of its negative opposite of anger, and so this also in terms of the law of karmic cause and effect is also in the sense of that we try to restrain our retaliation and anger to those who harm us, or difficult conditions, or those who harm us, and of course sometimes it's very difficult for us to restrain ourselves and to prevent ourselves from retaliating to this kind of harm. But also what the sort of understanding of the law of karmic cause and effect also helps us to is to look in a much more far-sighted, long-term way, and therefore see that although it may be difficult in the short term, in the longer term there's a great benefit in restraining ourselves from retaliating or responding in kind with anger. And so so you have these these practices which all the perfections all act in antidotal way towards their kind of negative counteract, and then but then these are all, what we also do is also we can relate the practice. It's not that the practice of joyous effort takes place unconnected to these, it's connected. So you have the practice of the joyous effort of generosity, the joyous effort of ethical discipline, the joyous effort of patience. And so what they help us what that does is, with that joyous effort as a kind of underpinning, conjoined with the practice of, so for instance, if you're engaged in generosity and the miserliness comes up, then to overcome that, to act as an antidote and to counteract that, then if our practice of generosity is underpinned with this sort of joyous effort as well, so you have this kind of joyous effort of generosity, then that helps to kind of expand or increase or strengthen our practice, and this goes for the other perfections as well, the ethical discipline and patience. So this way in which the conjoining of joyous effort with the other perfections also has a way of helping strengthen the antidote of our generosity against things like miserliness, or our ethical discipline against unethical conduct. In Thupten Chögyal Drapa's commentary, he quotes from the Sutra of the Close Application of Mindfulness, where he says, he doesn't say, the sutra says, the mental afflictions have but one foundation, which is laziness. And then it goes on to say, whoever has that foundation, or whoever has that foundation has laziness, and it literally says they are one that has chukun mebayin. So you have one who has chukun yamlin diduba, chukun lamnin mebadoshi duba, chukun mebayin slapna. De lelu chenina or call a chugin yamlin mebadoshi diduba, chugin yamlin.
Kadi?
Chambaneshaki do de la Chambaneshaki Jonana, Sikje Tamadigi, Sikong Tamadi, the Dela Chukum Mebayin Slapna, Rimshi son ready, ko Chugin Yamlin Mebadochi, and a Chugin Yamlin compelled to do Humades.
Tell a chicken mebayin sidupena.
Or the jet.
Majuta do some down to chicken mebayin sidu jambang around Jimba yina, Jimbe paru de chimba. Chudimina, Chudim paru de chimba. Or chimbigi tsejuerba. Dikun Yungumares, chicken mebayin sech.
Parchin really gets say Chagamanes. Sundramena, Parchin really gets say Chagamanes.
Oh, the Yungumares. Completion
complete, yeah, incomplete. Yeah, so there's a line at the end which sort of actually has to be interpreted. It literally would say something like they don't have Dharma or something like that, or they don't have Dharma practice. But the way I would interpret this is to say that if they have this base or this foundation, if they don't have the foundation of all the mental afflictions are based have one base, which is laziness, and if for those who have that laziness they don't have, what I would say it means is that those who have this basis of the opposite, of laziness, don't for them the perfections cannot increase. So I'm sort of saying that the practice of the individual perfections can't increase without this kind of supportive practice of joyous effort. And so since all the mental afflictions are based in laziness, and for those who in laziness arises, then their practice of generosity, the perfection of generosity will not be perfect, will not be complete without this foundation of joyous effort. The practice of ethical discipline will not meet the measure of what it means to be complete ethical discipline without this kind of supportive antidote, the antidotal condition to laziness, the supportive practice of joyous effort.
All of that, and Zundri Yagoji Yombala, and Zundri meeting shorting or Shango Yore. That Zundri meeting shorting or Shandandita, then the Siji Hamasum to the door, tea meeting Chosha, Lelo Niela Shambata, Dilu the Nineva star. Or the Luzambe Tatambo, then the Gezerum Chigi Tavatinagola, Ludan Yi Leso Mirua, Numlegi Devale Shimbelota. Chawa Nyambale Shambata, gewa drobale gilone se nye minube yamdo danila nyebele los ta 남자 운동을 한주 레로스도 땅은 문제지나 다라서도 와 인가란조 냠뇨요 다디 인가란조 냠뇨 타르심버레 제장가 류당 이시 류세디 개침부 송 시다 송요다 아주 이지고 송요마 제장 아란주 밀치기 관련 계절 제백값을 아니 예백값을 상으로 지게 전시된 거야디 被개천부를 저장가 류 아란주 류 코란 데 셈이하고 치는 디그 류 컨데 강주 먼저 가르치는 디그를 봤을라나 디기요 말이지 저장가 류다 이 니가 아니 곧 아란주 가르치는 류디 남사견도 간데 샤마샤디 셈기 치고리 셈 미게비 초는 망체 민게비 초도 좀비 류기 쩌바차동 상말로 민게비 초도 차디기요. 그봐?
예.
대인도 좀비 다고 지기 셈 교와 땅도 좀비 류대양랑 신기 내당 교와 땅고 샤원도 좀비 류당 아니 이가 아니 디 지금 이걸 되는 거지 나봐. 다디 란주기 미딘초던 거 손도 좀비 아주기 딱 대화 등은 생기도 봐. 남샤존도 민 준비 신예디 아주기 계획이 초라야 셈토암 대화디 디 준비를 손도 좀비 다 민기위기 렐로 등은 주도 좀비 란주 남샤존도 아니 지기 류 대보세 삼마당의 직당 아니 이다 지기 민계의 초를 파당 당셔도 디게 기부 문제 제단티
가기대 건데 나트 나트mus
무샤견도 준주 문제 제비가라
야
아니 이 계획 초서 파 로버들 쪼게 온데 준비 준주 문제 치기도 와
자
디나신 다 준주기 미딘초 레롱 문제 제비가라 류다 이니기 아니 대화디 대화 진단들 문제 치기도 왔어 지과
알레오 대외진당
다 대화디 가르쳐도랬으나 민기회 초도 요몽
야.
초도
야.
봐 어디 문제 치고도 잠배 다 말하는 남샤균도 세미나로 인지민지 준주기 미딘초 준주기 년부 컨테스팅도 슬라운도 잠배 아니 말하는 주 류기 아니 샤탑세고로 다 류기 대당세와 대당 아니 지기 셈기 삼로당당기 삼로당당디기 다 념레 대화 세지도 념레 대화 세도 잠배 고 가르도 념레 대화 세들 삼로당다니 아니 레수미롱 이 레수미롱 와세디 고아티냐나 레수미롱 세도 잠배 개월 파 땅에 차브라 땅 마땅무치 민기를 쳐로 파땅 보인자 레수미롱
오케이
제정가 레수미롱스 제정가 레수미롱 어디 고알 땅버스는 빼나 다 바르마도지 셈디 개월기 초로 파 만로베이나 도 시타 빼나 말은지 니 쿠샤베이나 니 쿠데베 손로지 빼샤원도 셈베 니 녀샤베이나 고 개월에 치고 말은 민개월에 치고 말은 디기도 와세 삼로 찌요 봐 어딘데도 삼로 디기 ramsan land 가르쳐 왔으나 단대 얘기 니녀당 섬 니녀와 점식이 아니 디 개와도 민개와도 다도 루마된 손으로 차원되어 점배 디양 레기멘도스 가르쳤으나 디 준주기 아니 벌써 그래 믿은 초를 셨어
디양 파르마데
디양 어디리 준주기 믿은 초 인단데 가르쳤으나 디기 민개와라 방을 지금 믿듯이 이내에 심 얘기 계획이 초선 줘야라 그 바로 주기도 있어. 념대 대화 세트다.
Yeah.
Nyomlegi dewalaya shaba tarangi ankolaya junjul never check to say. Redwa Tata water Nyomle de was the wall of Muzinjinguri, Tanda Shulova Subadinguri. The Jazanga Dorduna TH Swayers to Shuating.
Yeah.
Okay, Tiasunda. Unmute. Unmute yourself. This one. Okay. Oh. Yomo ni your love song.
Ni no. Ni ba the somason.
Ni se several times on Chesanga Lu dan yi lesu mirunwa seti lesu mirunwa yongdandi samatangdandi nga ransu namsha gyundu pena ni ku debi sunrochi samatangbi na nye debi na ani lo di mingewe chola ke mare gewe chola ke mare ani parma sunrochi re samna di yang ani mingewe chododa ke dhugu mindu de yina yang di sem lesu runga chigi mindu sem lesu runga chigi mewe jumzen karasina zunju di lesu runga de lesu runga sidu zambe Koran gewegi chola pa gyobar cheba de zunju isi korba gewegi lela pa zunbar cheba de zunju isi de ta tanda di pena ranzu ki sem gewa da mingewa niga la parma sonro chi shaya de la yang ani zunju di gewa la parche chigido sidu lesu mirwa jisanga wadiri sha tanda di 고구문도 칠한데 끼어 고마서 고도 니 라비나 비전 카나비 비전 러스 어디 있어 디 줄사르비 줄줄해 줄줄 봐
Gigere.
오케이
Gigimba. So here what in the second in the second half, or the last 3 lines of the second verse of the chapter, in the root text it says it's opposing. So then he begins to explain what this opposing factor of laziness is about in more detail. And so he says in the root text it says its opposing factors are explained as laziness, attraction to what is harmful, and despising oneself out of despondency. So in Gyaltsab Dhamma Rinpoche's commentary to that, he says, I will explain the antithesis or the opposing factor of the opposing factor to joyous effort, which is laziness. And then he says that it says that it's the laziness that grasps at the happiness of lazing around, sort of lazing around or being indolent, where body and mind are not pliant or not kind of serviceable or not pliant. And then he also says the laziness that grasps at negative sort of forms of activity, and then the laziness that sort of disparages ourselves or puts oneself down by thinking that we cannot do this. Having become discouraged, we put ourselves down and sort of disparage ourselves by thinking we cannot do this. So he sort of talks about this, sort of identifying this way of sort of identifying the opposite of the joyous effort. And we are this is quite easy for us to relate to. We're well versed in these practices. We have great experience in them, and so very interesting point that is noted here in Gyaltsab Je's commentary is that he talks about where the body and the mind are pliant. And normally we would just think, more in terms of mental, the sort of mental side of laziness. But here it also talks about the sort of aspects, the physical as well as the kind of mental aspects, and how we sort of so this, it can relate not just to what the body itself does, but also how the way that we sort of hold ourselves or carry ourselves, or how we perform our activities. But it can also relate to the activities themselves, which are performed by the mind, because of course, if we talk about the way the body, the way we sort of carry and hold ourselves, but also the things that we do with our body, then of course what it's saying here is that of course this all relies on the mind. So if the mind is sort of more engaged, or if the mind is in a more kind of generally virtuous condition, then the body will follow along with that, engaging in more virtuous activities, but also sort of be in a sort of more serviceable way for virtue. And so if we change the mind, it's less likely to fall into the negative side. So if we change the mind in a positive way, then the kind of aspects of the different aspects of the physical will also change in this way, and both will improve with that. So this is kind of identifying the opposite, the counter opposite of laziness. And here so it also talks about the sort of, so well, it also talks about this nyomlegidewa. In the Tibetan, it uses the word nyomlegidewa, which is a kind of laziness, which it's a kind of laziness which comes from being attached to kind of idle pleasures, being attached to pleasure, which then prevents us from exerting ourselves. And so in Geshe-today's commentary, he talks about is sort of the body and mind become unserviceable or unpliant. But what it means to also be unpliant means, because the purpose of the joyous effort is to help us to become the mind and body, to become pliant in order to engage with virtuous activity. So this is a sort of, this kind of laziness is sort of, which has an grasping at happiness. So and here we're not talking about, there's many different kinds of happiness, right? But here we're kind of talking about the happiness, or the kind of comfort or happiness that comes from the afflicted or non-virtuous side. And so then the joyous effort is the opposite of that, which then makes it pliant or serviceable to engage in virtue. And so, we also we look at how our body, so this is why there's always a primary importance to the Dharma. I think I forgot this from earlier. There's a primary importance to the Dharma practitioner of the reliance on mindfulness and mental introspection. And we use this to see how our physical state condition is, how our mind is. And I think Thea was debating with Rinpoche, because they said there are two ways in which this kind of indolence of this kind of laziness, which comes from attachment to negative, sort of more negative pleasures, occurs. Now, one of the ways, if we think about something like sleep, then sleep is generally neither a non-virtuous thing nor a virtuous thing. It's neither. It's a kind of neutral thing. And so actually what we have to think about is that these kind of neutral activities, so not just the direct opposite of the engagement, sort of the negative or mentally afflicted or negative side, but also even in conditions such as sleep, then generally for normal people, it's in sleep, the mind is non-serviceable. And therefore, because it's non-serviceable, it actually acts as a obstruction to joyous effort, because and so you have these are kind of activities which are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, these kind of neutral activities, still are something which joyous effort provides an antidote to. They're because they're still obstructive to, even though they're not non-virtuous, they still are something which gets in the way of and obstructs, harms the development. It stops the mind from being serviceable. It stops the body from being serviceable. And again, as I said before, serviceable means service, putting the body and the mind into the sort of service of virtue and having delight in it, which is what joyous effort is. So you also have this kind of, even these activities which are neither non-virtuous or virtuous still become this sort of they are still this sort of laziness which comes from attachment to non-virtuous happiness, still, or even neutral happiness, still are the identified as the the sort of something which the joyous effort provides an antidote to. Sorry.
Voilà. 다 단다디 부르디 녀라 잡으라 차르마도 디 디셰디는 tudin chuli tabe 게 야고도 디나르 세비나 조던 시교증학 기 조갈 합들도와 대양 류다 셈레스 미롱신 개월 민족을 당동 롱유 냠베 시슈 제be권이 냠되게 되어라. 다 조디 치슈기래로 세 삼로디 땅토네 야고요. 섬상스도와 제장가 치슈기래로 세야디 베나다 란주기 미유 두야데 란주 미유 두야데야 바체 지구도나 대양래로 착주했어. 미유 가르스나 아주 수수기 지기 개와 공배도 동야이나 개와 공배 동야라 타르는 동구여이나 대 치슈. 그봐. 지단의 민개월 베스나 민개와 말해 이내야 고미유 디단디 체벌이야 로고구여나 아니 디 레마트나 디냐바 차봐 디 고이 닝지모도 바페나 주종아발 저고구여나 아니 주주 시바다다라 마텐바이나 주종아발 비게 저고 매비나 아니 주주 시발 마텐바디 냐바 차봐 지단에 주주 시발 마텐바디 냐바를 베스나 말해 주정아발로 저고구를 베스는 고고요 말해 이내 냐바도 저고구니에지나 저리 냐바 차봐 어디 당보디 지슈 자와 지슈시
자와 지슈 카데 쇼탄 조나베
시주 중에 원의 집이 중견지 솜시가 축보 듬버들도 대양 류도 셈 어디.
So perhaps to clarify what I sort of said earlier, which I've just mentioned earlier about this sort of providing the antidote, is in Thupten Jogye Drapa's commentary, and when talking about how to counteract these opposing forces of the joyous effort, he says that the mind and the body being non-pliant or non-serviceable and not kind of conjoined, not applying them to virtue, it can also come about through not doing something now, but this kind of procrastination of putting things off into the future. And so there's a form of laziness, which is the laziness of attachment to this this kind of indolence of which is still based in an attraction to sort of negative kind of the negative side of pleasure. So this laziness, which it craves for this form of kind of pleasure, and therefore puts off and procrastinates about things and puts off activities into the future. And so, because the Migewadang Gubadiba, the also Migebadan Gubad and Kebalas up with the Chawan member, the Dirba, or Shemba, no, he came into a Yambala Chawan. Oh, Mari, Chishugile. So this because of laziness, of putting things off, of procrastinating about them. So, you can't really sort of, let's say that you have a positive goal, a virtuous kind of goal. But what happens is that in order to work towards that goal, there are certain things that we have to do, virtuous things that we have to do. And it's not, it's not really sort of in and of itself sort of procrastinating and putting it off to a later time to do the virtuous causes to achieve that goal. It's not in and itself, you can't say that's a completely negative action, but what it does is it pushes the achievement of our virtuous goal much further away from us into the future. And so we can see it, you can still see it as a fault, because what happens, for instance, if I give you an example to explain that, if you're supposed to meet someone at 5 o'clock, and if you have to you'll have to leave the house at a certain time in order to make sure that you arrive at your meeting at the correct time. And so if say, for instance, you have to leave the house at 4 in order to make it there by 5, if you don't get out of the house at 4 p.m., then it's if it's a case where you absolutely have to meet that person at 5 o'clock, then it becomes a kind of fault, because you need to meet them, and you don't leave. You leave at 20 past 4 or half past 4 or something, and you don't get there in time. So we can't generally say that not meeting someone at 5 o'clock or not getting out of the house at 4 o'clock are generally considered to be kind of faults. But in the context of where you have to meet someone and you don't leave the house at the correct time. So in the same way, if you're trying to achieve a virtuous goal, but then you put off the kind of causes, or doing the activities which will lead you to that goal, then we can see that in a kind of faulty manner.
Hola. Tatinashin Dirisha Tati Chawan Shingi Losea Sundata. Tandi Shu Raba Ta Chawan Shin Siduzambe Anichigi Nam Ta Zawe Ko Mingawa Yimba Shenla Never Chavada Ran Never Chibiki. Ani Kandechilia, Susuitilia, Lo Computing to Vina, and Digi Yabardo, Susamotanchi, did Nusu Samotanchi. Di Nusu Samotanchi, any that dig never Hamogana ko Kayo Marva, then Jimmy Samotang Yorba. Just a Sudim Mosuna. Any never didn't teach ever Yunguri, and Ganja Tachevich. Godua, some not all the bit Tachevich, or the Jungu Zambe. That didn't give Chawa the Digigi. Gewadinji Chegure. Tadinji Gewadinji Chegure Samia de la Tanya Dindir and the Jian, Nietzsche to Mion, some sound of a chick, some of the lessona. Or the Lelo Chapter. Tadi Dustan Kasore a deep Matic. But that day Chawani sent to Shikari of the Nancy Pavina. So did today. Bodhisattva member of Gashin, Chagwe Sigi Nubicon, Chawan Balishamba, so Tarashat. Just Mingivi Chodelia, and Namsha Jundu, Mingivi Chodel, Duguyabache, and Mingiva the Yimba Hakoni, Mingivi Chodel part and do Mutin upon Rodiati, ne Chawan Balishambas. Or that digi Yashudi Karahaku Dusna. Chawa Nyambali Shuba the Hakoya de Riva, Tichude. Chawa Nyambadi Nyamba Yimba Hakoyachi. Tangaranjogi Nyamba Yimba di Nyamba Yinsu di Shivu Samako de Tembe, and then Tanamsha Jundun di Chedi Chigio, di Chebe Gablaya, Kibu Jungore, and Kibu del Chan Shigua. Jazangata Dindigi Kibu delia Chana Nyaba didn't teach you Yunguyori, some Kobatan, and Namsan delia, and Chawa Nyambalan. Chanson said, and somebody how could 지단 따과 꼬마 잡디니 디기 배나 따과 미지 꼬마 잡디기나 콜 캡산라기나 그 꼬마 잡아디 그 꼬마 임바다 거라 하고 요래디 얘나요 코디 가서 그래 캡산들 삼고 코지 다 개요 말이 예 두자데 지고 때네 예 기부도가 지고 봐 저 제가고 자회의 삼목호라나로네 기부도 용부도 딜을 하고도 지게 얘기 아니 녀바사고 요래 세 삼로 주코서나 아니 딜라고 진다 딜러 신에 삼목호 언제서 배 저와 신 다고 삼로 나로려 지 가서 그래 독도 마소네 녀녀마 내가 녀바 제셔줘디 독 콩도 쉬버더지 코바나로 독 로봇 하 먹어내 녀다 독 세버지 어제 녀마 당에 딜을 셔버더니 독 세버도 지고지 않으셨다 딜을 셔버는 앞에 튼 용서말에 삼매 삼로들레 토베나 어디 녀바디다 자원인 신길로 도탑들이셔 당연히 있다는 문진식으로 봐. 주주 선배들이 숨바디 교고지 나셔버리나 아니 말하는 다 다바다 탐지 준비 고반다 아니 신의 룹세 손로보다 아니 지게 가서 그래 수림 송지 다 수림 송벌 때는 된저 토구를 해야다 늦어 상황로 다 지기 아니 참참 깔레다 도스 카운도 준비 다딩이 제토서 말에 섬녀 중보이나 아니 당연히 봐 세티 소소소로다 돌드나 소소소소로야 통중체봐 어디래도가 어디다 예반나는 예바체 숨드는 진나도가 오 따디 준주기 미든 쇼디 숨디 알아서 카디 얘네 디 기거를 알아줘라 어디 가서 디 깨버까블이야 캐터고리 카디나로야 도서 대리니 내가 시시비 디나로 도서 디 디나로 도서 디 디나로 도서 저 준주기 냠네 비다 지니지는 디 숨나로라 따접지 최고 유스래요 아니 들은 아주 대샤셔
And so there's a lot of detail about so it's very specifically, I think it's three kinds of the opposing force of joyous effort, which is the laziness, which are identified in Thupten Chökyi Drapa's commentary. The first one was the one I was talking about there, which is the laziness of attachment to kind of non-virtuous pleasure. Kind of indolence with in terms of a kind of indolence, it's often called, that kind of laziness. The second one is in relation to kind of sort of lower kind of activities, and taking joy, getting attached to, and having taking delight and having happiness in sort of lower kind of lower forms of happiness and pleasure, which then kind of overwhelm us. And so this is the laziness which is the laziness which is attachment to negative activities. The laziness which is attachment to negative activities, or the grasping to negative activities. So this is that sometimes it happens with us that we sort of, there are things that we, so this also a little bit predicated on the fact that what I need to explain is that also here is sort of when it talks about bad activities or negative activities, it also does rely on that. These things do rely on the fact that we need to know that they are negative. We need to identify them as a fault. So in the sense that if you don't realize that something is a fault and carry it very specifically relies on the fact that you know that this is a negative activity. So there's kind of form of lower kind of negative or unconstructive form of happiness which we get attached to, and then from that we these sort of base activities that we engage ourselves in, they produce some kind of pleasure or happiness in us, and we get attached to that. So at that sort of level, what happens is that it has to have this what's the word, criteria, that you know it is a fault, that you know that it is the activity is a bad activity, and that is an essential component of this form of laziness. So for instance, if you've always if someone has been a thief for a long time, or has always been a kind of thief, and they carry out their their thievery, but they don't really, in some way they just think about, they think about the advantage or the profit that they get from stealing from others, but in their minds they don't really understand in some way, or they don't really think about it as a fault. They just kind of think about they don't see it as they don't see that stealing as a fault, but just see it as just focus on the kind of profit of it, of profiting from the lack of from disadvantage of others. But then at some point, perhaps something happens and they suddenly sort of realize that actually there's the faults, or the negative side of that stealing, and then there's this. So then this is at the point where they've realized that particular activity is a negative activity, and then they kind of will start understanding that. They'll kind of shrink away from it, and then eventually come to understand that it's a negative action, and kind of shrink away from it and try to stop themselves from doing it any longer. And that's how really the counteraction the counteraction to it takes place. So in the same way, it is important in this kind of the laziness of attachment to negative activities, that you do understand that the activities that you're engaged in themselves, which you think are providing you with some kind of base pleasure, are actually negative. That's very important for that form of laziness. And then I'll very quickly cover the third form of laziness, which is in Thupten Chikidrakpa's text also, because time is running out. But if we're this is the laziness of the laziness of being of kind of disparaging ourselves. It's the laziness of looking down on ourselves or disparaging ourselves, and the way that it occurs is that, for instance, in the wish to achieve liberation, the wish to achieve enlightenment, the wish to achieve other positive states such as shamatha, and sometimes we can engagement in ethical discipline, which would then lead us to rebirth in the higher realms. If we think about all these things, there are times when we sort of look down on ourselves and think that kind of disparage or denigrate ourselves and think that we can't do it. So if you were to summarize it, it would be a way of sort of not looking down on others, but of looking down on ourselves. And so this kind of laziness is the kind of telling the Chattuchero.
Other one, it sounds like Gilubilelo.
So the laziness of the glooposcope. So it's sort of it's a laziness which comes from feeling that our abilities are not sufficient, and we get discouraged, and then it's best described as a laziness of shrinking away from, withdrawing from the task in hand, which comes from a sense of discouragement about ourselves and our abilities. So this is the kind of laziness of shrinking away from the task that we need to do because of kind of disparaging ourselves. So these three forms of laziness are what are the opposing forces of the opposing forces of the opposites of the joyous effort, and these arise in us all the time. And so what we now need to do is to since we have here some categories of the different kinds of laziness, then we need to, when they arise in us, we need to sort of work with them by saying, well, oh, this particular form of laziness that's arisen in me is in this category, or we sort of put them into each of the boxes. And then if you do that, then your practice of joyous effort has really become a very strong practice.
So today I skipped the three or four different types of
Joyous effort.
Joyous effort. So in our next meeting or the class, I will try to explain the different types of joyous effort. Okay.
Rinpoche, I'll put in the group the different kinds of laziness also, so that people can see them more clearly. Yeah.
So there are 3, there are also 4, there are also 5. So you can maybe Simon, you read the Tibetan Church Towers commentary, and then you can just post that.
I'll translate it and post it in the group. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Dedication, please.
Sure, Rinpoche. Having thoroughly investigated in accord with all that I've heard, day and night through the 4 reasonings, mind born of reflection on these topics of contemplation, may this discernment sever all doubts. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you're the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Getso, please remain until samsara ends. In all my lives never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. By completing the qualities of the grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. I fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri who knows reality, and just like Samantabhadra as well. I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the 3 times in order to have good conduct. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you.